There's a plant growing in the cracks of parking lots across America that contains more nutrition than most vegetables sold in grocery stores. It thrives in 120-degree heat. It survives on rainfall that would kill wheat. It produces food without fertilizer, without pesticides, without irrigation systems. One plant generates enough seeds to feed itself forward for 40 years. And you've been taught to poison it on sight. For thousands of years, this plant fed empires. It sustained populations through droughts that collapsed civilizations. It was written into medical texts, stored in royal tombs, traded across continents. Then in the span of a single generation, it was reclassified, not as food, as enemy number one. Today, homeowners associations fine people for growing it. Chemical companies engineer products specifically to kill it. Agricultural departments publish technical bulletins calling it invasive. Municipal codes classify it as noxious. And while this happens, those same people spend $60 billion annually on supplements trying to replace what this plant offers for free. The economic contradiction is staggering. We pay to destroy it. Then we pay again for inferior synthetic versions of what it naturally provides. Omega-3 capsules, antioxidant powders, mineral supplements, vitamin E bottles, an entire industry built on replacing what grows in the cracks. This isn't about gardening. This is about how free abundance gets transformed into managed scarcity. How knowledge gets erased so completely that people forget they ever knew. How industries worth hundreds of billions require your ignorance to survive. This is the story of porcelain, the superfood that refused to die. Welcome to Veiled Earth, the discovery they tried to ignore. In 1969, researchers arrived on a small Greek island with a problem they couldn't explain. The population there had the lowest rates of heart disease in the developed world. Not slightly lower, dramatically lower. These weren't isolated people. They lived modern lives, had access to modern food, but their cardiovascular health defied everything science predicted. So they started testing olive oil consumption, wine intake, physical activity, fish in the diet, all the Mediterranean diet components everyone talks about. The numbers didn't add up. Something was missing. Then someone noticed what the elderly women gathered every morning before breakfast. Not from gardens, from the spaces between stones, from field edges, from anywhere this low-growing plant appeared. They had a name for it, Glystrida. Scientists collected samples, sent them to laboratories in Minnesota for analysis. When results came back, nobody believed them initially. This common plant, this thing growing wild everywhere, contained omega-3 fatty acid levels higher than any green plant ever tested, levels comparable to cold water fish. The findings were published in 1986. The paper was peer-reviewed, documented, verified, and then largely ignored. No major food company picked it up. No agricultural investment followed. No public health campaign emerged. The science existed in journals, but it didn't move into practice. Because what they'd found wasn't a product, it was a threat. Portulaca oleracea, in English. Porcelain, a plant that makes fish oil supplements look redundant. That grows without asking permission. That can't be patented, can't be controlled, can't be turned into a profitable supply chain. The research sat quiet for decades, but the plant remembered what humans had forgotten. Because 4,000 years earlier, other people already knew exactly what porcelain could do. They just didn't need laboratories to prove it. The food pharaohs couldn't enter heaven without. Long before modern science, humans were already paying attention. In the 1980s, archaeobotanists excavating Bronze Age sites in the Mediterranean made a discovery that rewrote timelines. Inside ancient storage vessels, they found carbonized porcelain seeds, not scattered accidentally, deliberately placed, sealed alongside barley and lentils, staple crops. The carbon dating was precise, more than 4,000 years old. Porcelain wasn't surviving at the margins of human activity. It was being managed intentionally, harvested deliberately, stored as food. The pattern repeats across continents. In Ozark cave systems, archaeologists uncovered seed caches exceeding 12,000 years in age. Among them, porcelain seeds, stored with squash and sunflower. Plants we know were cultivated intentionally, not survival rations. Strategic food storage. Ancient Chinese medical texts dating to 2000 BCE list porcelain as a superior herb, not for emergencies, for daily health. They called it ma kai xian, the horsetooth vegetable. Instructions for preparation appear in texts spanning 3 millennia. No interruption, no forgetting. Indigenous peoples across the Americas recognized purslane instantly. The Hopi called it verdolaga. The Navajo gathered it fresh. Australian Aboriginal groups harvested it continuously for tens of thousands of years. Every culture that encountered this plant independently reached the same conclusion. This was food, not famine food, not desperation food, integrated food. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If humans across every inhabited continent recognized purslane as valuable for thousands of years, what changed? Why did one generation decide it was worthless? Or worse, dangerous? The answer isn't found in ancient ruins. It's found in what happened after World War II, when chemical companies needed new markets and American suburbs needed a new religion. The biology they don't want you to understand. At first glance, purslane looks unremarkable. Low-growing, sprawling across ground level, thick, succulent stems that seem fragile, small paddle-shaped leaves, smooth and rubbery, tiny yellow flowers that open briefly in morning light. Nothing about its appearance signals importance, and that's the deception. Because beneath that ordinary exterior is survival technology most crops don't possess. Purslane uses CAM photosynthesis, crassulation acid metabolism. Most plants open their stomata during daylight to absorb carbon dioxide. That process costs them water. In heat, in drought, that water loss becomes fatal. Purslane does the opposite. It opens stomata at night when temperatures drop and moisture loss minimizes. It stores carbon dioxide internally as organic acids. Then during daylight hours, it photosynthesizes with stomata sealed. No water escapes. No stress response triggers. No collapse occurs. That single adaptation changes everything. It allows purslane to survive on annual rainfall amounts that would kill conventional crops. Researchers have documented purslane thriving on just 2 inches of rain per year. Less than Death Valley receives. Less than wheat needs by a factor of 10. Heat tolerance is equally extreme. Field studies show purslane continuing to grow and produce in temperatures exceeding 45 degrees Celsius. That's 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Lettuce wilts at 85. Spinach bolts at 80. Most leafy greens die in sustained heat. Purslane flourishes. Then there's soil tolerance. Purslane grows in compacted dirt where root crops fail. It tolerates pH ranges from 4.5 to 8.0, acidic to alkaline. It thrives in disturbed soil, construction rubble, roadside gravel, conditions where conventional vegetables starve. And reproduction? A single mature purslane plant produces up to 240,000 seeds in one growing season. Those seeds don't expire quickly. Under typical soil conditions, many remain viable for 4 decades, 40 years. You can till soil today and purslane will germinate from seeds deposited before you were born. But seeds aren't the only strategy. Every stem segment that contacts soil can form roots. Cut purslane, pull it, fragment it. Each piece has regenerative potential, which is why eradication fails so reliably. Herbicides kill visible growth. Tillers break it into pieces. Mowers spread fragments further. The more aggressively purslane is attacked, the more opportunity it has to multiply. Chemical companies know this. That's why they recommend repeated applications, year after year, just to achieve 90% control, not elimination. Control. This isn't accidental resilience. This is adaptation to chaos, to heat, to scarcity, to disturbance. Purslane evolved for exactly the conditions modern agriculture is increasingly facing. And that's the real threat. Not that purslane competes with crops, that it exposes how fragile industrial agriculture actually is. The nutritional profile that destroys industries. When researchers finally stopped treating purslane like a nuisance and started measuring it properly, the numbers were difficult to ignore. In 2014, University of Texas researchers conducted comprehensive nutrient density analysis across 47 fruits and vegetables. They ranked foods by powerhouse nutrient content. Purslane scored at the top. Start with omega-3 fatty acids. Leafy greens aren't supposed to contain meaningful amounts. Most don't. Purslane contains 400 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid per 100 grams of fresh leaves. That's the plant-based omega-3 associated with cardiovascular health, inflammation reduction, cognitive function. Compare that to fish oil supplements. Standard capsules contain 300 to 500 milligrams per dose. Retail price: $40 for a 60-day supply. Purslane gives you equivalent amounts in a handful of fresh leaves. Free. Growing in cracks. But it doesn't stop there. Beta-carotene content in purslane exceeds carrots on a per-weight basis. 7 times higher. Beta-carotene converts to vitamin A in the body, essential for vision, immune function, cellular health. Vitamin E content is unusually high for a leafy vegetable. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant typically associated with nuts and seeds, not greens. Purslane contains it abundantly. Then there are betalain antioxidants, compounds usually found in beets, studied for their role in reducing oxidative stress and inflammation. Purslane contains them naturally. Mineral profile follows the same pattern: potassium, magnesium, calcium, iron, not trace amounts, nutritionally significant concentrations, the kind you're told to buy supplements for. And there's something unexpected: melatonin, the hormone regulating circadian rhythms and sleep cycles. Purslane contains melatonin levels 10 to 20 times higher than most vegetables, naturally occurring, no extraction required. All of this packaged in a plant that's 93% water. Purslane hydrates while nourishing, valuable in hot climates where dehydration and mineral depletion occur simultaneously. One researcher described it simply: a multivitamin you can grow in a sidewalk crack. Now consider the industries this threatens. The omega-3 supplement market is worth $4.1 billion annually. Vitamin E supplements, $1.8 billion. Antioxidant powders and greens supplements, billions more. The leafy greens market, $12 billion annually in the United States alone. Purslane offers all of this for free. No extraction process, no encapsulation, no branding, no supply chain, just leaves you can pick and eat. If people understood this, if knowledge spread, these markets shrink, not slightly, dramatically, and the companies profiting from nutritional deficiency cannot allow that. The war they declared on free food. The American lawn didn't exist before the 1950s. After World War II, the GI Bill financed millions of new suburban homes. Construction companies cleared land, compacted soil, built foundations. That disturbance created perfect conditions for purslane. At the same time, a new cultural standard emerged: the perfect lawn. Uniform grass, mowed short, chemically green, no diversity. A lawn wasn't ecology, it was compliance, a signal that you understood suburban order. Purslane spread effortlessly through new developments. Homeowners panicked. Landscaping companies saw opportunity. Chemical companies saw a market. The herbicides were ready. 2,4-D. Developed during World War II for crop destruction. Biological warfare applications. After the war ended, chemical manufacturers needed new revenue streams. Lawns became the battlefield. Weeds became the enemy. Scott's Company, now a $3.2 billion corporation, led the marketing campaign. They sold the idea that weeds represented failure, that a diverse lawn meant neglect, that purslane was invasive, aggressive, something requiring chemical intervention. The language was deliberate: invasive, noxious, pest, words that trigger disgust, that bypass rational analysis, words that justify poison. Then homeowners associations codified the ideology. By the 1980s, millions of Americans lived in WA communities with bylaws prohibiting noxious weeds. Purslane appears on those lists regularly. You can be fined for allowing food to grow on property you own. Municipal codes reinforced this. Agricultural extension offices published bulletins teaching people to identify purslane so they could destroy it more efficiently. Land-grant universities received funding to research purslane eradication methods. Meanwhile, the lawn care industry grew into a $115 billion annual market. It depends entirely on enemies. If people realize the plants they're poisoning are more nutritious than grocery store produce, the model collapses. Purslane cannot be commodified at scale. It grows too fast, germinates in days, matures in weeks. It doesn't transport well, wilts quickly, bruises easily. It can't be patented because it's been cultivated for 4,000 years. Public domain. Free. Chemical companies can't sell herbicides for a crop that outcompetes weeds naturally. Seed companies can't create dependency when farmers can save purslane tubers and replant indefinitely. Equipment manufacturers can't sell machinery for harvests traditionally done by hand. The entire economic model of industrial agriculture requires crops that need constant inputs. Purslane represents everything that model opposes. It's free, It's resilient. It perpetuates itself. So it had to be classified as an enemy, demonized systematically, poisoned without question. Extension bulletins warn that porcelain becomes invasive without acknowledging that invasive means successful. A plant thriving without help is exactly what sustainable agriculture should look like. Instead, they teach people to see abundance as a problem requiring chemical solutions. And who benefits? Chemical companies selling herbicides, supplement companies selling omega-3 capsules, vitamin manufacturers, industrial farms growing water-intensive greens, every corporation profiting from scarcity and dependence. They convinced everyone porcelain is worthless, a pest, something to pour poison on immediately. The suppression has been so complete that most Americans under 40 have never heard the word porcelain. They've seen the plant everywhere, but they have no name for it except that weed. When you erase the name, you erase the knowledge. When you erase the knowledge, you erase the power. The world that never forgot. While American suburbs poisoned porcelain, much of the world continued eating it without interruption. The knowledge never died because the culture never broke. In Greece, glycerida appears on tables daily, gathered fresh, blanched briefly, dressed with olive oil and lemon. Simple food, no rediscovery necessary because it was never abandoned. In Turkey, semizotu appears in yogurt-based salads with garlic and walnuts, sold in markets, prepared in homes. Continuous tradition spanning millennia. In Lebanon and across the Levant, porcelain remains standard in fattoush salad, mixed with tomatoes, cucumbers, herbs, no exotic ingredient, daily food. In Mexico, verdolagas never left the mercados, cooked with pork, scrambled with eggs, prepared with chilies, working class food, restaurant food, street food, unbroken tradition. In China, Ma Kai Xian appears in markets year-round, listed in medical texts continuously for 4,000 years, sold fresh, prescribed medicinally, cooked traditionally, no interruption, no forgetting. The difference isn't access, it's culture. In places where food remained connected to land, where gathering supplemented growing, porcelain stayed visible. In places where lawns replaced gardens, where packaged food replaced gathered food, it vanished. Immigrant communities in America carried the knowledge quietly. Grandparents gathered porcelain, taught children its name, but assimilation has costs. To belong meant eating differently, maintaining property differently, matching neighborhood expectations. By the 1960s, the break was nearly complete. Suburban children grew up surrounded by edible plants they were taught to fear. The knowledge didn't die, it went underground, preserved in pockets, in families. In people who remembered when food didn't come exclusively from stores. And there it waited, because systems built on suppression can't survive disruption, and disruption was coming. The cracks in the system. In the early 2010s, something unexpected began happening. Urban foraging stopped being fringe, not because it was romantic, because economic conditions change. High-end restaurants started featuring wild greens on menus. Porcelain appeared on plates in Manhattan, Los Angeles, San Francisco. The same plant growing free outside, now served as a delicacy, described as ancient, traditional, rediscovered. Farmers' markets followed, small bundles of porcelain selling for $4 to $8 per pound. People paid willingly, not because porcelain became better, because the narrative changed. Seed catalogs quietly reintroduced porcelain as an heirloom vegetable. No acknowledgement that it had been classified as a weed for decades, just subtle rebranding. Then 2020 arrived, supply chains fractured, grocery shelves emptied, panic spread, and people looked at the ground differently. Searches for edible wild plants surged. Identification videos spread rapidly. The comments repeated themselves everywhere. My grandmother used to eat this. I've been killing this for years. I had no idea. Knowledge began moving horizontally, person to person, video to video, outside institutional channels that had suppressed it for generations. At the same time, climate disruption accelerated beyond deniability. Mega droughts, record heat, water restrictions, crop failures. Conventional leafy greens began failing across regions. Lettuce requires consistent irrigation and cool temperatures. As heat intensifies, as water becomes scarce, industrial greens become impossible to grow economically. Farmers abandon fields, prices spike, availability drops. But porcelain? It thrives in exactly these conditions. Researchers studying climate-resilient crops began mentioning it explicitly, not as a curiosity, as a necessity, a food that works when conventional agriculture fails. In 2021, University of Arizona scientists published findings highlighting purslane as viable nutrition in a warming world where water scarcity limits traditional crops. The paper noted that purslane may represent one of few options for sustainable food production in increasingly arid conditions. For 70 years, billions were spent poisoning this plant. Now, as systems destabilize, researchers quietly admit that purslane offers exactly what failing agriculture needs: drought tolerance, heat resistance, nutritional density, zero input requirements. The plant never changed, the conditions did, and the people who spent decades teaching you to destroy purslane are now cautiously suggesting maybe, possibly, it might have value after all. No apology, no acknowledgement, just subtle repositioning. What this means for what's coming: we're not heading toward agricultural challenges, we're in them. The American West faces the worst megadrought in 1,200 years. California's Central Valley, producing 25% of America's food, is fallowing fields, no water. Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada. Same story. Conventional agriculture depends on stability, predictable rainfall, moderate temperatures, reliable water access. Those conditions are disappearing, and crops selected for industrial efficiency don't adapt quickly. They collapse. Lettuce needs consistent irrigation. Spinach bolts in sustained heat. Most leafy greens require specific conditions or they fail entirely. The infrastructure supporting them: vast irrigation systems, climate-controlled greenhouses, refrigerated transport. All of it requires resources becoming scarce or unavailable. Purslane requires none of that. It survives on rainfall amounts that would be classified as drought. It thrives in heat that kills conventional crops. It grows in degraded soil without fertilizer. It produces nutrition without asking for anything. This isn't theoretical. In regions already experiencing water scarcity, purslane grows wild while farms fail. In urban areas where food deserts expand, purslane appears in vacant lots, offering free nutrition while stores close. The plant that was classified as enemy number one for 70 years may be one of few foods that continues producing as systems destabilize. And the people who poisoned it, who taught children to fear it, who built billion-dollar industries around its destruction, they're slowly, quietly, acknowledging this reality. But they're not giving you the knowledge freely. They're repackaging it, selling purslane seeds as heirloom varieties, marketing forage purslane at premium prices, finding ways to commodify what was always free. Because if purslane remains free, if knowledge spreads without control, if people simply start eating what grows naturally, the dependencies collapse. And dependencies are how control is maintained. What you do next. This isn't about rejecting modernity. It's about remembering what modernity deliberately erased. Here's what reclaiming that knowledge looks like practically. Learn to recognize purslane: thick, jade-colored stems sprawling close to ground, small paddle-shaped leaves, rubbery texture, tiny yellow flowers that open briefly in morning. Once you know its form, it stops being invisible. You'll see it everywhere. Stop poisoning it. What you destroy shapes what survives. Every time you spare purslane, you're preserving food security, your own and potentially others. Harvest it when it appears. Young stems and leaves are best. Before flowering, rinse thoroughly. Eat raw in salads. Cook like spinach. Add to smoothies. Blend into soups. Simple preparation. No exotic techniques required. Save some seeds. Let a few plants flower and go to seed. Collect seed pods when they dry. Store in paper envelopes. Seeds remain viable for years. Plant them deliberately or let them scatter naturally. Teach your children its name. Names carry memory. Memory carries power. The moment something has a name, it stops being disposable. A child who knows purslane is food will never poison it unknowingly. Share with neighbors, not as proselytizing, as offering. There's this plant growing in the alley. It's edible, high in omega-3s. Want to try some? Knowledge spreads through demonstration, not argument. Document what you learn, when you harvest, where it grows best, how you prepared it. Create records. Because institutional knowledge failed, community knowledge survives. Understand what you're actually doing. This isn't gardening advice. This is undermining dependencies that require your ignorance to function. Every person who stops buying omega-3 supplements because they eat purslane represents lost revenue. Every lawn that tolerates purslane instead of poisoning it threatens lawn care industry profits. The system depends on you not knowing. Your knowledge is the threat they can't eliminate with herbicides. The pattern that keeps repeating. Purslane isn't unique in this pattern. Look closely and you'll see it everywhere. Dandelions, lamb's quarters, chickweed, plantain. Dozens of plants classified as weeds that sustained humans for thousands of years before industrial agriculture demanded monocultures. Each one was reclassified. Each one was targeted for eradication. Each one threatens profits by existing freely. And each one survives despite chemical warfare, despite cultural suppression, despite entire industries dedicated to its destruction. The pattern reveals the mechanism. When abundance is free, it becomes an enemy. When knowledge spreads without cost, it becomes dangerous. When plants feed people independently, they become weeds. The classification isn't botanical, it's economic. A weed is anything that undermines scarcity-based profit models. Purslane survived 4,000 years of human cultivation. It survived 70 years of chemical assault. It survived cultural erasure so complete that generations forgot its name entirely. And it's still here, still growing, still offering nutrition without conditions. The plant doesn't need you, you need the plant, especially in what's coming. As water becomes scarce, as heat intensifies, as conventional agriculture fails, as supply chains fracture, purslane will be here, growing in cracks, producing food, waiting for people to remember. The knowledge that survives. This story ends where it began, with a plant growing in parking lot cracks that contains more nutrition than most grocery store vegetables. That survives conditions killing conventional crops. That feeds itself forward through decades without human intervention. For 70 years, you were taught to destroy it, to fear it, to spend money poisoning it while spending more money replacing what it offers freely. That wasn't accident, that was design. Because the industries profiting from your dependence cannot survive your independence. And purslane offers independence. From supplements, from grocery stores, from the entire industrial food system. That's why it was classified as a weed. That's why children grew up not knowing its name. That's why billions were spent convincing you it was worthless. But knowledge that survives 4,000 years doesn't die easily. It goes underground. It waits in grandmothers' memories, in immigrant communities, in rural families, in people who never forgot. And now it's returning, not because institutions decided to teach it, because systems built on suppression can't survive disruption. And we're in disruption now. The choice is simple. You can keep poisoning purslane while buying supplements, or you can remember what humans knew for millennia. That food doesn't require corporations. That nutrition grows freely. That the most resilient plants are often the ones we're taught to destroy. Purslane survived without you. It will survive without this knowledge spreading. But you might not survive without it. Because what's coming requires resilience. And resilience looks like a plant that thrives in cracks. That survives on nothing. That offers nutrition freely. That plant has a name. Purslane. Portulaca oleracea. The superfood they labeled a weed. The food that refused to die. Now you know. What you do with that knowledge determines what survives. Not just the plant. You. The knowledge is here. Growing wild. Free. All it asks is that you remember. If this unveiled something for you, subscribe to Veiled Earth. The next unveiling comes soon. And everyone reveals what was hidden in plain sight, waiting for you to see.